be pretty intimidating people to content people. I think partly it's because word nerds don't have the same kind of level of street cred as the colouring in department. I think mainly it's because when we work together on projects, we don't collaborate right from the beginning, and when we do come together, it's when we're asked to sort of magically create some content to replace some lorem ipsum on a template. And at BNZ, our design team is based down in Wellington and content is up in Auckland, so we're geographically split as well. So it makes it hard, and it's difficult to collaborate, but it's not impossible. So by doing these things, content and design, I think, can come together in a happy marriage of colourful pencils and dazzling Microsoft Word documents. And today I'm going to talk through these things in a bit more detail and share our story about how content and design came together to redesign the BNZ website using some principles from Lean to create better experiences for our customers. So once upon a time, the BNZ website was getting a bit creaky and kind of coming to the end of its natural life. It was large, over 1,000 pages. It was built on a CMS that was really difficult to publish on or extend in terms of its capability. And the content wasn't really fit for purpose. So here's what the credit card section used to look like. There were lots of pathways everywhere. We had about 30 different pages to sell 4 different types of cards. And the content was pretty rubbish. And then someone had a bright idea, well, maybe we could kind of solve these problems by adding some pictures of the cards, but that didn't really seem to work too well. So quick tangent, at the same time, we'd just finished a redesign of this ugly old microsite, which sold a subgroup of our credit cards. It basically was an online brochure. There were tons and tons of pages. But when we did some analysis of the user journeys through the site, we realised that people were actually reading tons of this content before buying a credit card. So we figured, what about if we give them less content to read and reduce the amount that they had to read so they could read a bit faster and hopefully buy quicker? So we worked with an agency to create this version of the site, and it had 7 pages versus the 30 or 40 that the previous site had. And sales went up, and we didn't even change the application form, just the content and the design. So we wanted to take what we'd learned and apply it back here to our redesign on bnz.co.nz. And at the same time, we'd also been getting pretty inspired by this book. The previous web design had taken about 2 years to build and launch. We'd involved pretty much every team across the bank, every man and his dog, in doing that redesign. And there was enough documentation produced as part of that to sink a ship. So we decided to take some principles from this book and apply them and take a different approach this time round. And I guess by taking a leaner approach and validating our ideas early on with customers, we hope to avoid spending heaps of time, energy and resource kind of building something like this with all the bells and whistles, when something like this might achieve the same outcome. So we set off with a bit of a spring in our step to embrace our project in a lean way, with these core things at the heart of it. So everyone knows that every good project worth its salt needs a good code name, so say hello to Operation Alpaca. Today I want to share some of the tactics that we use to redesign the content. And I guess a bit of a confession up front, this was our first foray into Lean, so it's not going to be a textbook kind of example of how to use it and apply it, but more of a kind of dirty, down and dirty story from the trenches. So this is where we started, with loads of questions and not many answers. We were asking things like, how do people choose a credit card? And what is it about rewards points and credit cards that kind of make people tick? And how do you sell more than just a piece of plastic, but kind of more of the experience of banking with BNZ? So to get answers to some of these questions, we first turned to our users, and we kind of got our hands on every single piece of kind of user insight we could find at the time. So we trawled through all of the feedback in the credit card section, feedback that had been left by our users, and we discovered a few things by doing that. So there was a real frustration from customers about not being able to clearly find rates and fees information about credit cards. There was also some frustration around not being able to easily compare the differences between the cards. And help content was a bit of a mission to find. So people were coming to the credit card section looking for phone numbers about who to call when they'd lost their credit card, or it had been stolen while they were overseas, or how to put a PIN on their credit card. And they weren't finding that help content very easily. We also talked to our frontline staff and asked them how they sold credit cards to customers and what types of questions customers had when they came into the branch about credit cards. And the thing that stuck from those conversations was that they just really simplified the choice. So the first question to customers was, are you looking for something that will give you rewards, or do you just want something that's simple and fuss-free and lets you get the job done? So we filed that piece of insight away. We also had some eye tracking software on the site at the time, and that revealed that users weren't looking at the content in the left or the right-hand columns. There was a bit of a blindness to that content, and people were really only seeing the content in the middle section of the page, and even using that to kind of navigate their way around the section. So they weren't even using the navigation on the left-hand side at the time, which was pretty clear. So that was kind of what we got our hands on in terms of user feedback, and we also had a few hunches of our own. And the first was, it was just too much choice. It felt like at every opportunity we were kind of throwing every single piece of content we'd ever created about credit cards at you at any given time. So asking you, hey, do you want to buy a credit card? Wait, go and check out this mega deal. Or hang on, why don't you want to do a calculation, or check out some FAQs. So there was just clutter and noise kind of everywhere. So it was no wonder our users kind of were confused and couldn't find things. There were also heaps of dead ends, so there was no way out of content like FAQ kind of help content. We didn't have any pathways from our rates and fees content back into our application form. So essentially we were sort of creating these content ghettos and sending customers down rabbit holes with no way out. And the last kind of insight that we had was that we felt like some content, important content that we knew customers were looking for, was buried way too deep. So before anyone has another epileptic fish, I'll just change that slide. So this is an example of that. So this is a piece of content about how much you need to spend on your credit card in order to earn a rewards point. And you'd think this information would be kind of front and centre on the actual card page, important information that people needed to know when buying a card. But actually this information was kind of buried several layers deep, and we knew from traffic and analytics to this page that people just weren't finding it. So with the insight that we had from our users and some hunches of our own, we pulled these things together into a lean canvas that looked a bit like this. And this was a really important document for us throughout the piece of work. It kind of provided a blueprint for us sort of stay on track and be clear about what we were trying to achieve. And it also gave us permission to say no to people, or just say no to things that weren't going to help us stay on track. Especially stakeholders who kind of wanted to sneak in their own extras. And so through our MVP, our minimum viable product, we wanted to test to see if we could get more people into the application funnel by reducing the amount of content, both in terms of the pages and the words, and also reducing the amount of choice that we were giving people. So we knew that our application form and our calculators needed some love, but we had to leave them out of this particular piece of work to stay focused on our primary goal. And the hardest thing for me personally in this project about MVP was kind of deciding and choosing what to leave out, and also just feeling comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling of launching something that's not 100% polished or perfect. And as a result of that, creating kind of content and design and technical debt that had to be cleaned up afterwards, so that we could get something in front of our users early to kind of start testing to see whether our ideas were on the right track. So once we were clear about our mission, the first job was to tackle the content and kind of figure out what we had, and boy, did we have a shitload, and most of it was seriously average. It hadn't been properly touched in a number of years. There were double ups and duplicates everywhere. There were loads and loads of words, but not much substance behind them. And it wasn't organised in any kind of logical or meaningful way. So a team of content editors attacked it, literally, with their scissors. And we printed off the entire section of credit card information and started cutting it up at a paragraph level and started to kind of regroup that back into similar topics and themes. Unfortunately, we didn't have the luxury at the time of having kind of one topic per page. The topics were just scattered across multiple pages, hence why we kind of cut it up at this sort of granular level. We also started separating out our help and support content from our sales content. So content around how to put a pin on my card or how to pay my credit card off, from information that would help people kind of make a choice about what credit card was right for them. And then we started analysing the substance. So at the time we had 1 page per credit card, and we created a bit of a spreadsheet to start mapping out all of the different features across all of the different card types. And by creating that features matrix, we quickly saw that some of the cards shared up to about 90% of the same features. And that information, those features, were just repeated and repeated and repeated across every single page. So that led to a decision to present these cards on 1 page and start highlighting the differences between them rather than just repeating the similarities, which is something that our users and our customers had told us that they'd wanted. And then we went through the fine print and sort of educated ourselves and became experts in translating legalese. And the way that we did that was, again, kind of back to a trusty spreadsheet, just creating a column for every single credit card that we had on the site at the time, and listing out all of the terms and conditions for that card underneath. And then we started colour coding them to sort of figure out where we were talking about the same type of small print in various different places. So the green ones up there, for example, are all different ways of talking about cash advance fees, same small print, but just kind of worded slightly differently. And so there were loads and loads of duplicates and double ups here, and we condensed and consolidated those down from about 75 different small print down to about 20. And this is where we ended up. So we started with 31 pages of content, and the number that we ended up going live with was 9. So once we got a handle on the content, we started to kind of reorganise and restructure that. So we mapped out a new IA and started capturing at quite a high level the different topics and content that each of those pages would need to cover. And ideally at this stage, we would have validated that with our users and maybe got some of them involved. But in this particular instance, we just kind of forged on to sort of launch this and test this with users once we've gone live. So with content and IA in a place that we felt was okay and pretty good, it was time to start deep diving into the content redesign. So when we first started doing this, David, the designer that I was working with at the time, he would kind of jump into Photoshop and start creating these beautiful kind of wireframes to capture his ideas and thinking. And I'd fire up Microsoft Word and start kind of tapping out my thoughts and ideas. But when we came back together, we quite quickly realised that these ideas were kind of at odds with each other in terms of the format that we were capturing them in. So we had to find tools that let us talk in the same language and let us collaborate across the geographical kind of divide, like he was in Wellington, I was in Auckland. So that meant saying goodbye to our dear friends Microsoft Word and Photoshop and actively staying away from our comfort zones, because the minute that we kind of diverged back into those was just friction and waste. And we really only kind of reverted back to those when it was time for final designs and content creation. So that meant that we spent a lot of our time here at the whiteboard, locked in a room, starting from scratch, kind of back to pen and paper concepts, together trying to figure out how we could reduce the amount of noise and choice, how we could kind of start moving people through the content in the section, and also how to start making sense of all the complexity so that our users didn't have to. And then we captured those kind of pen and paper drawings and just popped them into InVision so that everyone who was working on this piece of work could see them, which was really helpful given that we were kind of co-located. And this is also where we ended up storing kind of wireframes and early designs right through to final content when it was ready for sign-off. We also used Trello to kind of track where things were at with content and design and also dev at the time. And we had like a weekly stand-up to kind of talk through these things. And the good thing about using Trello and having that stand-up was that it meant that we could sort of align our priorities and dependencies and ask questions and capture ideas, track kind of issues, assign owners, due dates, all of that kind of stuff. And also if we had any questions about each of the things on this list, like have those conversations within the Trello cards rather than emails to and fro. So that was really helpful. So I'm pleased to say that no lorem ipsum was harmed in the making of this redesign. We used real content right from the start, and there were loads and loads of benefits of doing that. So it meant that there were no last minute changes to the design when we realised that kind of content wouldn't fit. And an example of that was we knew that we needed some kind of table to compare rates and fees. And so the design guys went away and created this beautiful table. It was responsive, it looked amazing. But when we looked at the features matrix that I talked about earlier, we really quickly realised that all of the features that we had to talk about and all the information would just blow out that design. So that wasn't great, but at least it happened early and we could kind of go back to the drawing board on that. Using real content also means that you're not jamming content into slots in a template right at the last minute. So when you kind of realise as a content person that the design accommodates 6 features and you only have 5. And it also meant that we could start sourcing imagery and illustration and that kind of thing early on because we knew what content we wanted to talk about. It wasn't just placeholder copy. So using real content kind of gave us an accurate representation of how the content would translate into the design. So something like this ends up looking something like this. And it was really easy to see where we needed to kind of pad out, remove, tweak, fine-tune, and refine that as we needed to. So we didn't use rigid templates or formulas, just a series of content principles that kind of ended up becoming content and design patterns. Sorry, Dan, I probably misused that word there. Bad timing on the speeches. Across all of the pages in the section. So this was kind of some of them, and I'll just talk through the detail of each of these in the next few slides. So start with yes. We wanted to make sure that for people who were ready to buy, they were in that mode, they'd done their research, they'd done their homework, they just wanted to get a card, that when they came to the site there was a clear link through or entry through into the checkout. No kind of rationale from us about why you needed the card, no pitch, just a simple kind of route through the checkout so they could get their task done. Mind the detail. So we knew that there was loads and loads of kind of nuggets of information about credit cards buried in policy documents, terms and conditions, help and support content, small print, everywhere. And we felt like it was time to stop assuming that people didn't care about this information, or even worse, that they were motivated to find it. We couldn't really expect our customers to make informed decisions about the credit cards if we were only kind of giving them half the picture. So we trawled through these documents and kind of did the legwork for them, and we found some pretty interesting stuff. So I've got some examples up here, you probably can't read them, but just to talk to a couple of them. One was if you bought an item on your card, you'd get an extra year's warranty on top of the manufacturer's warranty just by purchasing that item on your card. And another thing we found was if you'd spent $150 on something and then saw that item cheaper elsewhere within 30 days and let us know, we'd refund you the difference. So things like that were all kind of buried in documents across the site. So we kind of brought those things to the surface. Creating a narrative. So we wanted to create a narrative for our customers, both in terms of the headings that we were using within the pages and across the section, and also the hierarchy of information. We wanted to kind of use this to talk to customers in a way that made sense to them, and also guide them through the content so that they could make better informed decisions. Pathways, pathways, pathways. We knew that customers were coming to the section with a task in mind, and we wanted to kind of just help them get that done and just get out of their way. So for customers that were ready to buy, we provided several routes into the checkout. For customers who needed answers to questions in that moment, we'd just send them straight to help and support content, without kind of bypassing them through some random kind of page of offers, deals and promotions. We just kind of got out of the way. And we didn't want to leave people kind of hanging once they'd done what they'd came to do. So we created kind of a tight network of pathways between content to alternative routes or just kind of alternative opportunities for persuasion. Close the deal. So we didn't want our content to kind of end on a fizzle. We wanted to end it on a high note. And we wanted to do that to kind of give customers reasons that kind of reinforce that they were making the right decision, or reassurance or peace of mind, or even kind of an extra set of features or kind of customer testimonials that would just kind of help them get across the line and start that application and feel comfortable doing that. So throughout all of this, we had to involve our stakeholders, obviously, and at the bank we have tons of them. So we needed to involve them. That was kind of a given, but we didn't want to get into a situation where we were designing content and design as well by committee. So we kept our stakeholder group really tight. For this piece of work, it was mainly just product owners who were the subject matter experts and our legal team. And we kept our meetings lean as well, so both in terms of their frequency and their focus. And the good thing about our MVP was it kind of allowed us to do this. So we weren't kind of redesigning the whole website as part of this piece of work. We were just redesigning one section, so we could kind of stay lean and keep that stakeholder group tight because of that. So we held an initial workshop with our stakeholders to share the user feedback that we had discovered and also kind of discover any user feedback that they had as well. We asked them tons and tons of questions about their products and also got their take on the problems that we were discovering as part of our own kind of user investigation. And we found out a bunch of things. So they had user insights of their own. We found out about product benefits that we had no idea about. It was a good opportunity to ask them questions about how complex processes like balance transfers worked or how fees were charged. And in one case, we even found out that one product that we were talking about at the time didn't even exist. So it was a good chance to kind of help us simplify and improve the content even further. So the next time we met with them, we took our trusty IA snapshots that I showed before and some paper concepts. And the good thing about taking these things is it meant that we could focus the conversations on the customer benefits and the accuracy of the content and the structure and the narrative, rather than getting bogged down in detail like, I don't like that image, or why are you using an Oxford comma there? So that was really handy. When it came to getting final sign-off, we used InVision again. So that meant that we didn't have to consolidate and merge track changes in Word documents. Feedback wasn't being sent through email to individuals' inboxes. And it also meant that there was no overlap in feedback or comment. So if someone else was feeding back or providing a comment on something and saw that someone else had done the same thing in terms of providing the same feedback, they didn't need to kind of duplicate that feedback. Stakeholders were alerted when their comments and feedback had been resolved and addressed, and it also kept a history of all of the changes in feedback, which was kind of a sense of comfort for our legal team. So we got tons of feedback, as you'd expect, which is good, but we had to be really, really ruthless about sticking to our MVP and making sure that all feedback was helping us kind of stick to our goals. And that meant, in some cases, saying no to some feedback because it didn't help us achieve that. We also had regular show and tells for the rest of the business, kind of outside our key stakeholder group, so we could share what we were up to and get their kind of answer their questions that they had. So this was the kind of forum where we got questions like, why are you starting with the credit card section, and when's my content going to get some love, and why are you using those fonts, and that kind of stuff, which are kind of questions that would normally sort of bog you down in a project or kind of derail you, but because this was sort of separate from our core stakeholder group, it was okay to kind of answer those things in that particular session. So after all the content had been signed off and tested and approved, it was time to release our little alpaca out into the wild. So you remember that this is what the credit card section used to look like. And when we went live, it looked a bit like this. So I think we kind of felt relieved that we'd launched it, proud that it looked better, slightly cringy about what we could have added to make it better. But I guess kind of overall, the previous redesign, as I'd mentioned, had taken 2 years. This one took 4 months and 10 people kind of working on it solidly. It was responsive. We created new benchmarks as a result of this, so reporting got heaps better, and we had clear metrics to move. So in the weeks and months after we launched, we kind of kept a close eye on kind of user feedback and analytics, and discovered that the number of people starting an application form after we launched the new version went up by 15%. So taking away the noise meant that people were kind of finding it easier to apply, or maybe just kind of feeling more comfortable about that. More customers were making their way into help and support content, so we had less kind of negative feedback about customers not being able to find help content. And it also led to another lean piece of work to improve the actual application form itself and make that better and kind of remove some of the barriers that were not kind of enabling people to apply or finish that application form. But we didn't get it spot on, so there were still kind of grumbles about people not being able to find rates and fees content as easily as we'd kind of hoped. Some content still wasn't being found, like some particular help and support topics. One was paying your card off from another bank, with loads of feedback about that. And then some people just saying that they preferred the earlier version of the site because now they couldn't find anything. So since then, we've continued to run lean. We're trying to get more user input into our content and design decisions early on to sort of inform our choices. We're currently redesigning our help and support section, and we're using an optimal workshop tree jack test to kind of send that out to about 500 customers to get their feedback on the structure and the content in there. So it's an evolution, I guess. We're constantly learning, constantly evolving, and trying to kind of be better. So you'll also be pleased to know that content and design have remained happily married. There are the odd tiffs, but not unresolvable. So we've continued to run kind of content-led design pieces of work, everything from kind of homepage content, new forms, landing pages, section redesigns, a whole bunch of stuff. And we continue to kind of step out and move away from our comfort zone. So I've kind of started sketching and using pencils. And you know, the other day I was working with one of our designers and we were kind of like writing content together using a Google Doc like simultaneously. So that's happening. So I guess to close and to kind of sum up, I just want to leave you with my 5 tips for a happy marriage between content and design. Be clear about the problem that you're trying to solve. Don't kind of design content based on people's whims and fancies. Get on the same page early on and create the vision together. Find collaborative tools that let you talk in the same language. Ditch lorem ipsum, always, in favour of designing with real content. And test something that's not perfect, learn from it, and make it even better. Thanks so much.